Hello everyone and welcome to the Free to Be Me training. My name is Heather. Presenting with me tonight is Ange and Angela. We're health promotion practitioners from Access Health and Community. For those of you who don't know, Access Health and Community is the local community health organisation for Boroondara and Manningham. I would like to start tonight's session with the acknowledgement to country. We acknowledge the lands that we are meeting on tonight and the people who are the traditional custodians of these lands. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We value their ongoing contribution to the cultural heritage of these lands.
Thanks, Heather. So hi everyone, I'm Ange, and before we get started, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on some of the Teams features if you're not familiar. So the image on the slide is the control bar, which you'll see at the top of your screen. The main controls that you need to use are the chat on the left-hand side. You can press that to type questions or comments into the chat box. You can use the next one to raise your hand if you'd like to say something, and you press the same button to lower your hand as well. Then you have your camera and microphone. You're welcome to keep your cameras on. It's nice to see everyone's faces as we go through with this, as we go through the training. But if you could please remember to mute yourself on the microphone, which is that button there. That would be much appreciated, just to reduce some of that feedback. And then the red button on the right is to hang up from the training. Just a bit of housekeeping to get started. We do have a fair bit of content to get through, so we'll be mindful of keeping to time, and we ask for your patience if there are any technical issues with voice or video. I'm having some issues today, so I may have to turn my camera off just to reduce those a little bit. We encourage you to ask questions and participate in our activities using the chat box, and we will do our best to answer your questions and comments as we go along as well. As Heather mentioned, we'll be recording this webinar and we'll send you a copy of that afterwards. So we also like to agree on a few things as a group to help make everyone feel comfortable in joining in. So first of all, no one knows everything, but together we know a lot. We're here to learn from you just as much as you're here to learn from us. And this session really is all about us sharing experiences so that we can learn from each other. There'll be diversity within the group, so we ask that you respect everyone, their different opinions and experiences, and we hope that you feel this is a safe space that you can share your thoughts and experiences. But please be mindful that it's not a therapeutic session, and we're not trained to provide that kind of support. And on that note, we will touch on some sensitive topics as we go through the training, which might be difficult to hear about or talk about. So if you need to take a break or step away from the computer at any time, please feel very free to do so. And if you find after the session that you do need to talk to someone, there's some free phone numbers on the screen that you are welcome to use. And your workplace may even offer counselling services like the Employee Assistance Program. We have counselling services at Access Health as well, and you may have other ones which you might be able to utilise as well.
So I thought we could just start up with a warm-up activity just to get used to interacting in this online space and using just to get used to interacting. If you're happy to do so, this is an activity where we'd need you to turn your cameras on. So let's try giving a thumbs up with one hand and the OK sign with the other, and then try switching that around. And it's not as easy as it sounds. And I have been practicing this a bit.
All week I've been practicing and yeah. I just can't nail it. You
look like you're doing it really well.
Yeah.
It's taken me a lot of practice to get this good. Oh, thank you for getting involved. That's great. There we go. Thank you. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that everyone's coming to this training session with different levels of knowledge about the content that we're covering. We're going to cover some the basic concepts of gender equity for those of you who have never attended gender equity training before. And we hope for everyone else it's a great refresher that will reinforce what you already know. There will be some practical activities, but we're also packing a lot of content into this session. So we will be providing a PDF copy of the slides after the training. The topics we will be covering will be the difference between sex and gender stereotypes and their impact, some practical ideas and strategies for breaking gender stereotypes. We'll talk about gender inequality and violence against women. Excuse me. We'll have a short break and then we'll be talking about the Free to Be Me program and our Action Grants program. We will unpack unconscious bias and the language we use around children. And finally, we will talk about some strategies to dealing with resistance.
So the purpose of today's training is to increase the knowledge and confidence of educators and everyone else who's in the room to support gender equitable practices and the spaces where children can learn, play and grow. So to break that down a little bit, these are the learning outcomes, so the knowledge and skills that we hope you will walk away from tonight's session with. So we hope that you will understand the link between gender equity in the early years and the prevention of violence against women more broadly. That you'll have the knowledge to identify gender stereotypes and understand their impact. And then following on from that, increasing your skills to implement some of those strategies to break down gender stereotypes in your centre. And then lastly, increase your confidence in effectively responding to resistance and backlash.
Okay, well, we'll get into the content. Straight into the content. So we'll start off by talking about the difference between sex and gender. Hands up if anyone has seen or heard of the genderbread person before, or if they've talked about the difference between gender and sex. Is anyone? I can only see a few people on my screen. Anyone heard of that?
No, I haven't heard of that.
No? We think the genderbread person, oh, you have, great. We think the genderbread person is a great tool for talking about the difference between the two concepts of sex and gender. So, as we know, sex is biological. It is the physical characteristics that make us up, like the male and female body parts, hormones, and our X and Y chromosomes. It is what we are assigned at birth, male or female. Gender, on the other hand, is a concept that people develop or learn. Gender norms are the roles, behaviours and attributes that society attributes to men and women, and that relates to masculinity and femininity. For example, children are taught that boys have their hair short and girls have their hair long. And they learn this because this is what they see and hear from their family, friends, and the media. Gender norms and expectations vary across cultures and can change over time. So in this case, it is now more acceptable and sometimes even considered fashionable for boys to have longer hair and for girls to cut their hair short.
So then we move on to gender stereotypes. So the gender stereotypes are the expected roles, behaviours and interests of girls, boys, women and men. And what the research tells us is that between the ages of about 2 and 3, children start to identify gender roles and stereotypes to kind of figure out where they fit in. So they sort of see them as rules to abide by, So if they're exposed to subtle messaging from an early age around what it means to be a boy or what it means to be a girl, they're more likely to want to fit into that either category because they want to be accepted by the people in their little worlds. So, you know, for example, these are sort of some of the common stereotypes for girls, you know, being sensitive, emotional, appearance focused, and the kind of typically feminine interests and activities. And just an example from the media here, you know, look like a girl, act like a lady, think like a man, work like a boss. So it's kind of reinforcing that stereotype that, you know, girls are more appearance focused, and kind of the heavy lifting in terms of thinking is more the, you know, the masculine or the boy men's domain. And a comment that we might hear is, have you got your bikini body ready for summer? So again, reinforcing that, the importance of the appearance as well. So these are reinforced through things that we see in the media, advertising, but also through the people in our lives that we interact with. And we all know these sort of gender stereotypes for boys being tough and adventurous and strong, and those sort of more technology and construction, getting dirty, rough play kind of activities as well. And, you know, in terms of appearance, we can see that there are stereotypes for men as well, being that kind of muscular, strong, you know, showing that adventurous, rugged sort of side as well. And we might hear that in comments like, are you babysitting the kids today? You know, meaning that they're not the nurturing, caring, that's not their role. So I'm just going to show you a little video, and you may or may not have seen this before, but I think it really highlights, well, shows gender stereotypes in a lighthearted way, but it also highlights how they can potentially impact children.
Look at this. Look at this. Do you like a dolly? She'll go for the dolly. You're a good little Sophie. Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams. Ooh, look at this, Sophie. Meow, meow. I think she liked that pink dolly the best.
If I were to tell you actually that Sophie is Edward,
Does
that change anything?
I maybe thought, oh, this is a little girl, so I have to give her little girl things.
Hello. 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 Come on.
What's this one? Oh, what's that one do? Is that a robot? What about this? Oh, you like that one? What does this one do? Oliver.
You've gone for, you could say, boy toys for this boy.
Possibly in my subconscious, but for me, I was just going for what was around me, but then perhaps my subconscious was automatically playing a trick on me that I was.
If I tell you that he is actually a girl.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. I suppose it's because of the stereotype.
And then that changed your behaviour towards the child.
It did.
And your behaviour was quite directive.
1, 2, 3.
Beep, 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 beep. Do you want to see my robot?
She's picked up the robot, the car, the puzzle game. I think she's been much more physical in handling the child than the other adults have been with girls.
That really astounded me because I thought that I was somebody that had a really open mind.
Surprise. So I automatically went
went for the pink fluffy toy because I said it was a girl, so I was sort of stereotyping.
I've always thought I was rather more open-minded than that, and I would think, you know, these are children's toys, whatever the gender.
It will make me think the next time I'm with a child, so my niece or my nephew, to make sure that I am actually being sort of fair and equal with all of them, and just giving each child an opportunity to just be whoever they are.
Okay. Let's put that down. I really like that video. I think those kids are very, very cute. Let me just go back to the slides. Sorry. Okay, not that one. Sorry. There we go. Okay. I think it's quite a nice sort of light-hearted video, but I think it's interesting that you know, it sort of does make the link between how you know, stereotyping can have an impact on the way that children develop later on as well. I'm welcome to pop any comments or reflections in the chat box as well. So really, you know, if we look at gender stereotypes, I mean, what is the harm aside from, you know, toys and things like that? It's, you know, first of all, it can limit children's ideas about what they can do. So you might have heard the saying, you can't be what you can't see. So it might impact the way that they, you know, what they can see themselves doing as they grow up, or as an adult, potentially the jobs and choices that they make in their life. Other issues that, you know, from gender stereotypes, it can lead to things like body image issues. We see more men in leadership positions and more women in those, you know, those caring type of roles. For example, this is a picture of our Australian politicians, which are mostly male, and not a very diverse representation of men either. So it also contributes to gender inequality in a number of ways. So female-dominated industries are often undervalued and underpaid, so those kind of more nurturing and caring type of roles. And often that work is a little bit less stable as well due to the part-time or casual nature of that work. And we see in Australia that 68% of primary carers for older people and people with disabilities are women. So women really are shouldering most of that responsibility when it comes to those caring roles as well. So it's important to acknowledge here that gender stereotypes don't impact everybody in exactly the same way either, and other factors such as age, disability or ability, etc., can add another layer of complexity to that. And hopefully everyone remembers this video that the picture is from a few years ago, where a BBC reporter was working from home and his kids kind of wandered into the room, and it was very cute and very funny. And then a woman raced in and pulled the kids out of the room. And when this was initially reported in the media, you know, it was said that, you know, the nanny came in and pulled her out of the room, when in fact that's the mother. So that kind of assumption made by the media can be harmful because it reinforces not only gender stereotypes but racial stereotypes alongside that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ange. So the best way we can start breaking gender stereotypes and promoting gender equity is by ensuring all planned activities, games and play are inclusive and challenge gender stereotypes through intentional learning methods and everyday learning opportunities. There are lots of practical and easy ways we can do this, and we've come up with our own ideas and suggestions, but we're not early childhood experts and we have no experience working with children or using intentional learning methods and everyday learning opportunities to educate children. So this is where we can share experiences and learn from each other. So we're now going to split you up into 3 breakout rooms to discuss how you can use different strategies to break down gender stereotypes. Myself, Ange and Angela will be in one of the rooms each to take notes and help facilitate the conversations. This is just going to be a quick activity to get our brains working and to come up with a few ideas. So we'll be giving you 5 minutes and then bring you back to the main room where we will share the discussions of each group. So I'm going to start setting up the breakout rooms while Ange will talk you through the breakout room scenarios.
So we will be in 3 different breakout rooms, as Heather mentioned, and each room is going to discuss these 2 questions. So first of all, we're going to look at how we can set up play spaces in early years centres that are gender neutral and encourage girls and boys to use the space equally. And secondly, what resources we can use to help children understand a little bit more around gender, roles, expectations and opportunities as well. So it will be really interesting to hear your thoughts and ideas, because as we know from speaking with educators, everybody is already doing so many great things in this space as well. So it'd be a good opportunity for us to hear those ideas and share our thoughts with the group as well. So we'll break out and have a discussion that way, and then we'll come back and share with the group. How are you going there, Heather?
Done.
Nailing it.
Here we go. All right. So I will send you into your breakout rooms and we will come back at 7:01.
Great.
Sorry, it takes a little while for it to happen. Hello. So I'm just going to paste those. Oh, sorry, we're not quite all in our rooms yet. It looks like we've got a few people that haven't gone into rooms. Hang on. Sorry. Why is this not working?
Join breakout room.
You are joining? Is it telling you that you're going into a breakout room?
Mine doesn't say that.
No. People have just disappeared and then it seemed to be smaller. I've never done a breakout.
Not a prompt came up or anything.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure why. I'm going to close this room 3 and we'll just do it in the main room here with the 2 of you.
Okay. There was other people here before.
I'm here as well, sorry. I just can't, it says my video isn't recorded, so I can't turn my
Hello, sorry, breakout room. What?
Hi, Elvin.
Hello. Has everyone come back from the breakout room, or is this just breakout room 3?
No idea.
Sorry, everybody. For some reason, some people couldn't go into the breakout room, so I've brought you back here.
Yeah, we got an error.
Our little group here. I'm just going to. Pop the questions in there into the chat box.
Oh, cool.
For some reason it's not pasting. Sorry. Okay, here it is. How can I have to type them in? How can we set up play spaces that are gender neutral and encourage girls and boys to use the space? First one. And the second one is, what resources can you use to help children understand gender roles, expectations, and opportunities? So how would you set up a space to make sure that it's gender neutral?
I had one thought is, like, if you're setting up a space, to include pictures of both boys and girls in that space. For instance, if you're setting up a space corner, you know, my mind goes straight to astronauts who are men, but there are astronauts that are women, and having that, you know, just pictures so they can see, oh, everyone can find a place in this space.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Anyone else have any ideas about how we could set up a space that is not gendered, and how you could encourage both boys and girls to use that space?
Well, look, I'm coming from probably old school. Can you hear me on that?
I can.
Yeah. Look, I'm probably coming from old school, being probably one of the older teachers in this group. But I have to say that whatever we used to set up, it never used to cross our minds what gender would use it. We would have tinkering tables, hammering tables, and it never would cross our mind as to who was going to use it and how they would use it. It was just a free for all.
And both boys and girls used that space?
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. Yep, tinkering. And this is going back quite a while, but it was never part of our setting up that this can be for the boys, this can be for the girls. It was always never really given a thought. It was tinkering, and it was tools, and they all used it. It was fabulous.
That's great.
So I'm coming from an old school perspective.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with setting up those spaces either, as long as, you know, both girls and boys are using that space. Kelly, I love your comments about having both boy babies and girl babies in that home corner.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's the unsubtle stuff. Like, I think we all just plan spaces for spaces, as Andrea was saying. But when you look at the resources that you use to make it pretty and make it inviting and engaging, and you go to things like posters or books or adding in music or what the lyrics of the song are or that sort of stuff, a lot of that is gender or shows a gender bias. So the pictures, like as Alice said, the astronauts tend to be male. It's hard to find females represented in some of those forms. So that's the challenge. So to really think about that.
Yeah, Christine, you mentioned you like the posters. You can't be, you like the comment. You can't be.
Yeah.
See?
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's really good. And actually Inspiro have created a series of posters called You Can't Be What You Can't See. And this is one of the resources that we will be sharing.
Okay, cool.
And just quickly, that second one, again, we've kind of touched on it a bit already about what resources you can use to encourage children to think about gender roles and expectations.
We have a book, or one of the many. Obviously, we've done a book audit at work and gone through and looked at books in terms of gender and changing he and she and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
But there's a book, I can't remember what it's called, but it's about pigs and being a pigsty and the mum being the person that cleans. Oh. And like we've often thought about throwing it out, but we've kept it because it is such a direct prompt to just go, no.
Yeah.
To have really challenge kids. Is this something that only mums can do, like cook the meals, do the washing, do the whatever? So to actually have those very deliberate, purposeful conversations that, no, anyone can do this.
Yeah. That's a good point, actually.
Yeah, so you don't need to throw everything out.
Yeah,
You can really provoke the challenge,
And
the conversation.
Kelly, you've just said here, have them have different family members visit the centre and talk about their profession. Great idea. It's nearly time to go back to the room. Does anyone else want to say something quickly?
I just had a quick thought. Is like maybe us as educators need to show children of all genders how they can play in the space, especially if, you know, in their life maybe mum is at the kitchen. So how could he what could he be in that role? What does that look like? And kind of show them and give them that language. What would you say? What would you cook? All this kind of things. Yeah.
Brilliant. That's a really good idea. Because I mean, in my house, I've got 2 kids too. I do cook. I am very lucky. My husband's a little bit OCD, so he likes to clean. So we've got a shared role there.
What a great combination, Heather.
Yeah. I didn't encourage that. That was all him. He sweeps every day. So, but it might not be that way in every family. So it is really good to talk about who does the cooking and cleaning in your house. You know, could you help mum with the cooking, particularly if they're boys? And actually kids love cleaning. They think it's fun. The broom is the best toy, so just encourage it.
And sponges and warm water.
Yes, good one. All right, does anyone want to volunteer to share what we've talked about? I'm very happy to do it, but if anyone would like to. No, that's all right. I will close those close the rooms. Or are we all here? No, close room. Here we go. Sorry. Still getting used to using breakout rooms in Microsoft Teams. I've used it in Zoom before, but not Teams. So everyone should be coming back to the room now. Hi everyone, welcome back. Sorry, I did give you that little bit of extra time because we had some issues with some people not going into breakout rooms. So I just gave us some extra time to chat. We had a chat in the main room. So you might, sorry to those, I didn't actually give a pre-warning. Our chat was recorded. So if anyone wanted to go and listen to what we chatted about, you were able to hear it all. It was great though. Room 1, would you like to share what you were talking about? Did anyone volunteer or are you going to do it on behalf of them, Angela?
Yeah, I'll do it. I took notes, so yep. Sorry, I wasn't sure that we were room 1. Apologies about that. So our group around the first question around how to set up play spaces that are gender neutral and encourage girls and boys to use that space. We spoke a bit about imaginary play, using the sandpit and outside, being open to all, making sure that there's not too many resources that speak about one gender, and also regarding free play, not participating in areas like the block play, and encouraging the girls to do more engineering, for example, and asking the children to make a choice about what they would like to do with their time and where they would not normally play, and giving them the skills to support them to do that. So that was around the first question. Do you want me to do the second question as well? We did discuss that too.
Oh wow, that's quite a lot. It sounds like we had a lot to say.
Our group just rocked it out.
Well, we don't want to spend too much time on this. We might go on to room 2 if that's okay.
Sure.
Yep. Am I room 2?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, we had some great discussion about some of the resources and things that people in centres are using. Using things like, breaking gender stereotypes by, showing boys and girls in non-traditional masculine and feminine roles, which was really good. But there were some really great ideas around how, how to include sort of parents and the community in these conversations as well. so things like sending YouTube linked videos or resources out to parents as well, which I thought was really, really great. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Our group talked a bit about resources too. One of the things we mentioned was not having very many women represented in posters and pictures, like astronauts, for example, and also using books and talking about and not throwing out books if they're, you know, less representative of gender or diversity, but using those books to talk about the different messages in them and how gender and diversity could be more inclusive. We also talked about, I think in general, how we use resources to set up a space. So it's good to have, you know, the home corner or the tinkering corner, but maybe not to use gendered decorations to make them more gendered. Gosh, we were having such a good conversation that I wasn't very good at taking notes. Does anyone else want to jump in case I missed something?
Same for my group as well.
No, that's all right. We've got a lot to cover.
Heather, I just want to add that one of participants in my group mentioned Level Playground as a resource. I wonder if you could explain a bit about that.
Well, we'll be sharing that as a resource after the training, so everyone can have an opportunity to go and check it out. Do you want to share your screen again, Ange? We'll talk about, We've got another quick activity. So this activity we'll do as a group, as a big group. So
you go.
Sorry, early years educators play a really important role in helping to shape children's understanding of gender roles and stereotypes. And while children don't understand the term gender equity, what they do understand is fairness. And we can teach them to recognise when individuals and groups are being treated unfairly and to give them the right words and skills that they need to challenge unfair attitudes and behaviours like gender stereotypes. So we're asking you, how can you encourage children's critical thinking and give them the skills to challenge gender stereotypes? So feel free to unmic yourself if you want to say something, or you can use the chat box. So how do we teach children what is fair? So how do you, not us, but how do you teach children the difference between what is fair and unfair? Yep, sharing. Yep. My daughter loves the words sharing is caring. That's a great one.
Something which came up in our group as well, which from Suki, which I thought was a really good point, was having discussions with the children and asking questions, you know, why is that a boy's colour or why is that a girl's colour, to kind of get children involved and being part of that discussion.
Breaking up there a little bit.
To challenge stereotypes as well.
Great. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Talking about it. Yeah. Holly says, I like to say we're all human beings. Yeah, that's a nice one. And it's also good to talk to children about how people can be similar and different. And that, you know, if we're all the same, that's very boring. And it's about celebrating diversity, which we know you all do very well. I know I have children in daycare. I know daycare centres and kindergartens already do a really good job of talking about diversity and celebrating different cultures. So it's about maybe talking about it a little bit more. Curious questioning. Thanks, Amy.
And Heather, one thing that my group mentioned was around the naming of insects to make them males, and questioning the children about, oh, you know, why do you do that, for example, and why don't we make it a female for this little bug, for example. So yeah, that was something that we picked up during our discussion.
Yeah, or just not giving it a gender sometimes, just calling it an it or a they or a them. That's great. I have a suggestion actually, and it's you could involve children in setting up room rules or room agreements, like we did at the start of this training. We talked about how things we would agree on as a group to help everyone feel comfortable to join in. You could do the same thing with the children at your centre. You could ask them what they think some good rules are for their room, so that they can feel safe and comfortable, like being kind to everyone, sharing, etc. And then remind them of those rules when they're broken. And this could be a way of starting the conversation around what is fair and unfair behaviour. Holly says changing your language to her or they instead of always him. Yep. Mm-hmm. Interesting insect facts, such as the pretty coloured ladybug is the male. Yeah, I like that. Complimenting the male with an appearance-based compliment. Same with the peacock, yeah. Great. I think this has been a great exercise. So we did come up with some other ideas and suggestions to start breaking gender stereotypes. Oh, sorry, Angela has said here, we discuss our rights and use the Declaration of Human Rights as a basis for our conversation. Oh, that's brilliant. I didn't even think of, you know, bringing up human rights, but why not? So here are a few of our suggested ideas. And of course, I think a lot of this has already been brought up. And the first one around books and stories, we've already talked about exposing children to a wide range of stories and using those stories to challenge some stereotypes. And it could even be around asking children about roles in the family. And this is something that came up in our group. If we noticed that a family where the mum is always cooking and cleaning, you could ask, oh, but who else in your family likes to cook or clean? Do you like to cook or clean at home? Another one is to swap around sex pronouns or make up a different version of the same story so that it's not always a white character from a conventional family. And then you ask the children, what does your family look like? Do they look like this? I think the presentation has frozen, Ange. Should I start sharing my screen?
Can you see the books and stories one or not?
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Oh, good.
We also have we Access Health and Community have an online book review tool, which is freely available on our website. This tool helps you to think critically about the books that you're reading with children. So not just about the gender balance of boys and girls in a story, but more deeply about the gender stereotypes that are attributed to each, to a boy or a girl, and to analyse the behaviours of the characters in the books. And as we mentioned before, I think Christine mentioned that rather than throwing out a book if they are less diverse or like a bit too gendered, use them to have conversations with children about the messages. And this tool will help you to think about that as well. We've got some fun facts about books. So in a study of over 5,000 books, 25% of them had 0 female characters, and Time magazine listed the top 100 best children's books of all time, and only 53 of those books had females that speak. So I find those stats a bit shocking. We talked about using pictures and posters, and here's a couple of posters from a series called You Can't Be What You Can't See, which was created by Inspiro. So these show real people in a variety of jobs and recreation roles. And of course, using posters about feelings and family types. And we'll be sharing all these resources with you afterwards. Also talking about women in sport and about the children's favourite TV or movie characters and other strong female lead characters. So this will help normalise women who express those more masculine qualities, such as being strong, self-confident and able to express their opinion, so that they're not labelled as being bossy or moody in other settings like the workplace. In terms of the way you set up a play space, you could create non-traditional role play areas that has no obvious associations with gender, such as a pizza shop or a supermarket or maybe a vet. You could put more traditional gendered toys in non-traditional play spaces, so like dolls in the block corner and superhero characters in the home corner. You could also consider the size and position of your play spaces. So is the block corner a bigger space in the centre of your room compared to the home corner or the art and craft corner? And obviously involving the children in designing and creating the space so that it will give them all ownership over the space, and so that both boys and girls will feel comfortable using the space. Everyday conversations are one of the most powerful ways we can help shape children's understanding and their views about gender roles, expectations and opportunities. And you can correct any stereotypical or limiting ideas. And the best way to do this, I think, as we mentioned, is by asking why. So she looks like a boy. Why do you think Ava looks like a boy? Or boys are mean. Are all boys mean? What about Ryan? He helped you on the slide the other day. That was pretty nice, don't you think? Another way is we encouraging children to notice and explore people. We've talked already about children noticing and exploring differences and similarities, but it's also good to encourage them to ask questions about the differences they notice and to answer their questions accurately and honestly. And another way is grouping children in different ways, such as by their first name or their height or their birthday. And this can be a subtle but effective way of encouraging them to think about their identity in different ways. And of course, by being a role model with our own behaviour, language use and actions. So considering the language that you use around children, particularly what you say to colleagues maybe about your appearance, and reflect on whether you provide and offer care to boys and girls in the same way. So would you give a girl a hug if they hurt themselves, but then expect a boy to dust it off and keep playing? I'm now going to talk about the difference between equality and equity and why it's important to use an equity approach when considering the learning activities that we provide children. So equality and equity are sometimes used interchangeably, but they do not mean the same thing. So the image on the left is a representation of equality. This is treating everyone in the exact same way or giving them the same amount. Equity, on the other hand, represents fairness. It means recognizing that different people need different things to reach the same outcome. In other words, equality is the end goal and equity is how we're going to get there. This is about men and women having the same opportunities and the same amount of control over their lives. But research has shown this is not the case. So how do we get to equality? Sometimes we need to put strategies into place to compensate for the social and historical disadvantages that women have faced. Strategies like programs specifically for women to enter into leadership roles in the workplace, or new policies that ensure flexible working arrangements for parents. And this will benefit women because generally women are the primary caregivers. In early childhood centres, we can improve gender equity by not just implementing some of the examples we talked through, but by actively encouraging children to participate in non-traditional activities, games and play. So I'm noticing the slide, there we go. For example, actively encouraging girls to play with the more physical toys like bikes, trikes and the climbing frame, because they may need more support and encouragement to use these equipment compared to boys, because they may have grown up in a society or a household or culture that unconsciously reinforces stereotypical play and toys and games. Likewise, boys should be encouraged to play with dolls or in the homemaker corner to ensure they develop a wider range of skills and emotions, such as their caring and nurturing sides.
Yeah, and I think this issue around equity and sport is something that comes up for us when we do some work with sporting clubs. So we try to encourage women and girls to be active within sporting clubs, and often clubs will say, well, everybody's welcome regardless of their gender, and that's technically and join. But if someone if a female is looking at a sports club and 80% of the players are men and all of the committee's men, might not seem so inviting to join in that kind of activity, which means that we need to implement strategies which reach out to women and girls, maybe more so than we would do for boys. Now we are going to just have a look at a video. I will just.
But want to turn your camera off. Your
sharing my screen.
Audio is a bit dodgy, Ange.
Thank you. Is that better?
A universal story and an Australian story. It's a story that occurs every 2 minutes. In fact. A story that happens 650 times a day, and in every kind of household every year in Australia.
I think it's not going to work, so I might share my screen, Ange.
As a girl.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
For some reason, it's not letting me share either. No. Angela, do you want to try sharing? For some reason, I can't either.
I just stopped sharing.
Oh, maybe I can now. No.
You might be able to now.
No, it's not.
There's
I
always got to
don't
be
think I
at least
can
one
either.
issue. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Just bear with us for a moment.
Not sure why that's not working. Sorry, Angela, did you say it wasn't working for you either?
Yeah, it's not working. Maybe just put the link in the chat and everyone could just maybe view it in their own time and we can just talk through the main points.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why that didn't happen. It's a bit annoying.
Is it just me that was locked out, or?
Yeah, I noticed you were coming in and out.
Yeah. I couldn't get back in. Yeah, so I'm back in now.
Admitting you.
Yeah, that's okay, Andrew. There were some issues. I kept admitting you, but it wouldn't let you in. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Sorry. Now that you're back with
okay.
us. Yeah.
Ange, did you want to try playing the video again, just in case your internet's working a bit now?
Yeah. Can everyone see that video?
No, we can see your calendar.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Anything yet?
Yep, we can see that. Let's try again.
This is the story of a boy and a girl. It's a universal story and an Australian story. It's a story that occurs every few minutes, in fact. A story that happens 657 times a day, every day of the year, and in every kind of household and every city and region across Australia. This is the biggest story behind violence against women. This story doesn't have a happy ending, because this is the story of how gender inequality contributes to the murder of one Australian woman almost every week. Sounds like a tall tale, right? Let's take things back to the start. Here's the story of a regular woman. As a girl, she gets told how pretty she is, never how clever she is. That if she wears a short dress, she's asking for it. She grows up and gets used to being harassed by men on the street. That's just the way it is. Here's the story of a regular man. As a boy, he learns that women aren't equal to men from a very early age. Even though both his parents work, on the weekends, his mum does the housework, while Dad watches sport. When he cries about being bullied at school, his dad tells him to stop being such a girl and just punch him right back. Technically speaking, we'd say that these social norms, practices, and structures shape both the boy and the girl, creating a society where women are valued less and men are expected to be dominant and in control. In such a world, disrespect and hostility is excused, and violence against women is far more likely. But back to the girl grows up into a woman. The boy grows into a man. And he hopes she doesn't get fat now that we're together. She's not sure whether she should laugh. They have the same education and do similar work. Yet he earns more money. He's quickly promoted, like other men in the company. While at home, she does all the household chores, and he takes control of their joint finances, seeing as he's the main breadwinner and all. When they're at the pub, he puts her down in front of his mates. His friends stay quiet. In the morning, he wakes up and blames the alcohol and stress. He always has an excuse. When she gets pregnant, her boss says she can't come back part-time. After the baby is born, the lack of flexible job opportunities and childcare keeps her and financial controls decision-making and her. They are not equals. On him, that her. Same real grows like she leads the violence until their story ends, one way or another. This story isn't a one-off. It's a story shared by 1 in 4 Australian women who have experienced physical or sexual violence from a current or former partner. And it's a story of 1 in 5 women since the age of 15 who experience including 4 of us, 1 women club, but it women's far children occur. Is the conclusion often reached after a life lived in a society where women and men aren't treated equally. But we, you and I, can change the narrative. Better education, policies, practices, or when women and men have equal power, value, and opportunities in relationships and in society, violence against women is less likely. By nurturing caring, respectful, and equal relationships, and by creating equitable and inclusive communities, workplaces, and institutions, we can create a society of equality and respect, where violence against women is unthinkable. Let's change the story, because ending violence against women starts with gender equality.
Okay. I've seen that video lots of times now, but it always resonates with me and has impact on me, because I think about how easily that could be me or somebody I know in that same situation. And we want to make it really all men are violent, and but that violence is a choice. And there's this great quote from the Stop It at the Start campaign, which says, disrespecting women does not always result in violence against women, but all violence women begins with disrespect. Often when we think about violence, we automatically assume physical violence, but it's important to acknowledge that the other forms, including financial, emotional, and psychological, which might never involve the perpetrator laying a hand on the victim, but are often just as dangerous. And it can be hard for somebody who is in a violent relationship that isn't physical to believe that they are in fact experiencing violence. And on the flip side, a perpetrator who doesn't hit or touch their partner might not see themselves as being violent either. You know, we want to acknowledge that violence in general affects men and women of all cultures, genders and backgrounds, and men can experience domestic violence, but what the evidence tells us is that women are at a much higher risk of experiencing violence than are the of that violence. And some groups of people are at experience greater incidents, so those with a disability, those who are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, same-sex attracted, or from culturally, linguistically diverse groups as well. So research into family violence from Australia and around the world tells us that there are 4 particular aspects of gender inequality which have been found to predict or drive this violence. And basically what this means is that in situations where family violence has occurred, one or more of these aspects has been present. So they're known as the gender drivers of violence, and they're the underlying beliefs, attitudes and behaviours which can start to develop from an early age. And if we challenge these drivers in the early years, which everyone here is in a really great position to be able to do, we can work towards preventing violence against women. So I'm just going to unpack these very. The first driver is the condoning of violence against women. So when instances of violence are excused or downplayed or blamed on the victim. So you might remember seeing an ad a couple of years ago where a young boy hits a girl and in the kitchen and then storms outside, and you know the mum says, "Oh, he only hit you because he likes you." And those kind of things are harmful because it sends a message that it's okay to treat girls and women in this way, and contributes to a culture which promotes that disrespect towards women. Secondly, we have men's control of decision making and limits to women's independence in public life and relationships. So we can see this within the public eye when we see things like, you know, having more men in Parliament and making those decisions for everybody, and chips, for example, you know, the men being in charge of the finances, as we saw. So then we have rigid gender roles and stereotypes, which we've already talked a little bit about. you know, it also looks like things like saying to a girl, oh, your hair looks so pretty today. And even though that's something which is, you know, it's a compliment, it's a nice thing to say. If girls receive a lot of praise about how they look, it again forces that stereotype that it is really important for women to look pretty. Or you have the fourth driver being male peer relationships or male bonding that emphasise aggression and disrespect. So things like locker room talk, or you might remember a little while ago the St. Kevin's schoolboys who were on the tram and shouting that awful sexist chant as well. So we've talked about how the gender drivers of violence affect women, but it is also important to remember that that these issues affect men in a negative way as well. So I'm aware that we are running a little bit behind time-wise, so we'll make sure that we include this video in the resource pack as well. But basically what the video highlights is the link between, you know, men who stick to those rigid gender norms and stereotypes, and how that can correlate with particular attitudes and behaviours which have a harmful impact on themselves and others. So we're going to take a quick break, but just to summarise what we've gone through in the first part of the session, we've talked about gender stereotypes, why they're harmful. We've talked about how gender inequality drives violence against women, and how upholding those masculine stereotypes is linked to those harmful behaviours and attitudes. And for some things that we can do, we can use learning activities, games and play to be challenge gender stereotypes, encourage children to participate in non-traditional activities and challenge those gender drivers. So just pop the numbers back up there as well. And we're just going to take a short break. So it's 7:38 now. So we'll just take 5 minutes and come back at 7:43. But we'll be around in the break. If anyone has any questions, have a bit of a chat. We'll be here to talk about it.
Thanks, Ange. Did you want to stop sharing your screen? Yep, there we go.
Heather, Ange's quality wasn't very good coming across with the internet. So are you maybe able to do the second half?
No, I saw that. No, because I couldn't share my screen, Angela.
Right, okay, yeah. No worries.
Did anyone have any questions? Sorry about the audio. We did practice sharing our screens and somehow doesn't always go right on the night, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, we will obviously, as we said, share the videos with you after the training, so you can go back and have a look at them. The man box one is actually very good. As Angela said, as Ange said, yeah, it has some really interesting stats about how harmful some of those gender stereotypes can be for men. I loved everyone's comments and contributions to our discussion groups and our scenarios. Some really interesting suggestions there. The link, Taryn, are you referring to the link for the man box video? I can grab that just now. Oh, thanks, Angela. Thanks, Ange.
So Heather, you said you can't share your screen.
Yeah, that's right.
Let me just try. Let me just try now. There's a share content now. Let me just try sharing.
Okay.
How's that?
Oh, that's better. Yes. Maybe you can share the screen.
Maybe I can do that and you can talk through it. Let me just fix it up a little bit. How do I?
No, you just go down the bottom to the present button. So down the bottom, it's got notes and then.
Hold on. Let me try again, okay? Let me just.
No, you're right. Better. It's fine. You had it right, Angela.
Yeah, hold on. Let me just figure it out. Okay. Hold on. Let me go back.
Now just press present down the bottom next to the 52%.
Oh, yep.
Yep.
There we go. Let's try that. Okay. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you, Angela. That'll save us a bit. Oh, it looks like you're presenting out of Teams though.
I know, but is that okay for now or?
I'm sure that'll be fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So you just give me the go ahead to click the slides because I can't read your notes, okay?
No worries. All right, well, it's 7:43. We might get going because we don't want to keep you here any longer. Pardon, Angela? Ange? Sorry, Ange, did you say something?
Okay, all good.
All good. All right. So I think hopefully we're all back from our break because I'm going to keep going. So often when we do this training, we have some educators that that tell us, we do all this work and then the children go home or they go off to school and then all that work is undone. So we like to talk about what else is happening around us in terms of prevention to give a bit of context. This graphic is just a brief snapshot of some of what is happening around Australia. At a local level, community organisations like ours work with sporting clubs to help them increase female participation, but particularly in leadership positions. Schools now have respect for relationships as part of their curriculum, and local councils provide leadership workshops for women. Even libraries get involved holding gender equity and diversity story times. I know Manningham and Whitehorse Library hold gender equity story times during their 16 Days of Activism campaign. For me, this really highlights that for change to truly happen and for it to be meaningful, it is something that needs to be worked across all levels. Changing attitudes and behaviours takes time, but we've learnt from other public health campaigns such as quit smoking and drink driving that it's more effective if it's worked across all levels. And the gender equality work that you're doing in your centres is just one part of a big jigsaw puzzle. If you don't mind changing slides, Angela. So this training is an example of all of us coming together to work on gender equity at a local level. We also have a program that we offer early childhood centres by the same name called Free to Be Me. Some of you are already part of this program, but for those of you who aren't, I might just give you a quick rundown. So the Free to Be Me program supports early childhood centres to promote gender equity and challenge gender stereotypes by using a series of resources to look at your policies, practices, language use, and the activities you provide children. It's really important to acknowledge that you're all doing really good work in this space already, and it's important to promote that work. We can support you. The program can support you to promote that work within your centre to your families and the community. We also support you to look at the results of the resources and develop an action plan to implement changes. Next slide. We also provide small grants to schools, early childhood centres, sporting clubs and community groups in Boroondara and Manningham. to support action around gender equity and social inclusion. You can use this grant to fund things like attending relevant professional development training, creating new programs, or purchasing new equipment and resources, just as an example. So if your centre is looking to promote gender equity or social inclusion, and you need the funds to do this, we can help you apply for this grant. Next slide. Ange?
Can you see that? It's on my screen.
Yeah, I can. I'm just wondering whether we can hear Ange or not.
Okay, so will we talk a little bit about it and reflecting? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Sorry, I think there's a big lag, but hopefully you can still hear me just seconds later. So unconscious bias, as a definition, these are social stereotypes that form without the person realizing, so meaning that they're unintentional. They're the social stereotypes about specific groups of people that we form outside our consciousness. So this can be any group of people based on age, race, sex, gender identity. We learn them from our background, culture, and our personal experiences. And for better or worse, our brain pulls information and from it, and we use them, as little like snap judgment folders, which we keep to make judgments about people. So the biases that we hold are largely influence what we are into, but also we're not exposed to in our lives. So, this goes back to how we evolved as a species. Because if we saw somebody who is different, we might think different is unfamiliar and therefore unfamiliar is bad. But in our conscious mind, we might think, different means diversity and diversity means good. I think it's important to acknowledge here that everyone has unconscious biases, and it certainly doesn't make anybody a bad person for having them, but getting to know what these are within ourselves is important because they do have an influence on our actions, and they can be picked up by children in the same way that we pick them up from adults when we were children. And I think we all grew up with commentary about people's skin colour or religious beliefs, class, even things like weight and what's acceptable for some people and what's unacceptable for others. And of course we create our own views of the world, but those little pieces of information that we learn from our past stay with us, whether we like it or not, and they sometimes can influence our actions. Next slide, please, Angela. So for example, I invite you to reflect on the following groups of people that you see on the screen. So people receiving unemployment benefits, stay-at-home dads. When you were growing up, what was your understanding of these groups, or what was your exposure to these groups? It might have been positive, it might have been negative. And then as an adult, how are these kind of groups discussed in your own social circles? And things like this can be a little bit uncomfortable to think about sometimes, and that's completely okay. It's the first in really identifying conscious bias might be and where they come from. So what do we do with that information? If we identify something as an unconscious bias, that's the first step, and then we can become more learning about it through books, credible articles and resources, preferably that come from the group of people. And you can also look for opportunities to have more experiences. So this could be through hearing their stories at community events or having guests come into the centre and things like that. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's helpful to be aware of these biases because they can influence the way that we interact with children or parents. And our unconscious biases can come out through the language that we use. A common example could be something like, oh, your mum packed you a yummy lunch today. Obviously, our unconscious bias the ones who take care of making the food at home, and without realising it, we're reinforcing those gender stereotypes. And I know that it seems like a really small thing, but it's one of a lot of little things that can really help to build a picture of the world which children see around them. But mums packing lunches is a fairly clear-cut example of how language reinforces stereotypes, but we know from talking with educators that there's a little bit of uncertainty around the more subtle of language, what use, what's not okay. So we're just going to unpack that a little bit further now. Next slide, please, Angela. First of all, we would like to acknowledge that language is a really complicated area, and unfortunately it isn't black and white, so it's not as straightforward as saying the right thing to say or this is the wrong thing to say. And I know that saying the wrong is something that we might worry about for ourselves. I think it's really about being open to taking on board the progressive changes that happen in our language and environment. We don't have vocabulary that we had as our grandparents or probably even our parents, and we won't have the same vocab 10 years from now either. It's a learning process for everyone. Nobody gets it right 100% of the time, including me. It's just like any other skill that takes practice. But this is the kind of thing that will be so much easier for everybody if it's something that you can talk about openly with your team and you work on it together. And by no means are we the authority on your use of language, but I guess what we'd like to do is just provide you with a few guiding principles and practical strategies and really just try and keep it as simple as possible. Next slide, please. For example, we know that hearing generalisations, even if they're positive, can lead children to think that a category of people determines what they will be like or what they can do and take away that, that individual identity. So this is all about how we can avoid perpetuating stereotypes through our language, and we can do this by not grouping children together with certain attributes. So we might think that we're doing the right thing by praising children for good behaviour, but sometimes it could be detrimental when it's stereotyped, saying things like, girls, you're sitting there so nicely and quietly, or Emma, that's not very ladylike. Instead, we should be looking to, we should be talking to children in a way which recognises their individuality, not their gender or their looks. Commenting about girls looking pretty or boys getting big and strong can make children believe that other characteristics and qualities are less important. And I think this is a big thing for girls, especially because as girls and women, we're already exposed to so many messages that reinforce it, how much it matters, how we're supposed to look. And it is one of those grey areas with this topic, because we're not saying you absolutely can't comment on how children look, but I think we probably need to be moving away from commenting so much on looks, because it makes it seem like it's more important than it actually is. Next slide, please, Angela. And a lot of our language has become less gendered. For example, fireman is now firefighter. But sometimes we might do things like add in gender, such as saying male nurse or female doctor. Again, reinforces the presumption that being female and a doctor is outside of those gender norms. And we've already touched on some of this as well about, correcting stereotypes when children say pink for girls' colour or boys play with trucks. Colours, activities and chores are for everyone. Now, Heather is just going to talk about how we can start to deal with resistance as well.
Thanks, Ange. So unfortunately, we will often face resistance when working on gender equity, and resistance comes in many forms. This image is useful in understanding the scale of resistance. Often we imagine people at that entrenched opposition end of the scale. This would be someone who is very vocal or aggressive when they disagree with your point of view, and this type of resistance can be really confronting. Gender equality is a topic that some people actively resist because, as we talked about, gender stereotypes are often unconscious, so these people genuinely don't see the problem. We can spend a lot of time and energy trying to convince someone who is at this end of the scale, but we need to remember that it is very unlikely that we will quickly and easily change their point of view. We need to remember this particularly when we're dealing with a resistant parent or carer. It's not your responsibility to turn them into a feminist or a gender equity supporter. Take that pressure off your shoulders. It is only your responsibility to explain to them why their child was dressing up as a fairy or sword fighting with a boy, and to correct any misconceptions around why it was wrong for you to allow their child to do what they were doing. Next slide, thanks. If you have been in a situation where you've had to deal with a resistant parent or carer, it's really important to talk about the situation with your colleagues, to debrief with your manager, and to seek counselling support if you need it. But how can we ensure that staff are given the opportunity to debrief and to practice self-care? You could do this by adding it as a standing agenda item in your team meetings, or with your manager if you have catch-ups with your manager regularly. And to clearly advertise any employee assistance program that you might have, and to remind staff that they can access this support at any time and that it's for free. Next slide, please. There is a way you can raise these types of topics in a non-confrontational way with parents and carers, and even in the office amongst colleagues. You could use your newsletter or your social media account and other channels like Story Park to promote some of the activities that you do with the children, and to also explain why you set up that place or and why you did that activity with the children. You can share resources, blogs and articles like the ones that we're going to share with you after the training, and to promote campaigns and events like 16 Days of Activism, This Girl Can, and International Women's Day. It's also important to state your commitment to gender equality on your website. Communicating in this way could help change an unconscious bias or create even a small shift in their thinking, which would help them progress towards understanding how harmful gender stereotypes and the other drivers of violence against women are. Resistance, we hope, is something that doesn't come up for you that often, but hopefully by raising these types of topics more often, eventually more people will be sitting in that movable middle section of the resistance scale rather than the entrenched opposition end. And then having conversations with parents and carers about gender equity and gendered roles and stereotypes will not be so confronting. They might even be interesting and enjoyable. So this brings us to the end of the training. Oh, just in time, we got there. As we mentioned, we're going to send you a PDF copy of the PowerPoint presentation and all of the resources that we mentioned. We're also going to send a zip file through of other resources we thought you might find useful, and also the videos that we didn't get to play properly. We would really value your feedback to learn what you got out of the session and how we can improve. So we'll be sending you an evaluation survey, which should only take about 5 minutes of your time to do. And one more thing, we will be sending through a certificate of attendance for everyone, which you can use as discretionary CPD points. We may need to contact some of you to confirm your first and last name, but if you're happy, once we turn off the recording, you can just pop your name, your full name and your email address in the chat box, and that can be another way of confirming your details for your certificate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending the session this evening. We really appreciate it. And if you've got any other questions or would like extra resources or want to talk to us more further, we'll be hanging around now for a little while. You're very welcome to reach out to us via email as well. But